So Lucy, I want to talk about the stress involved in working in healthcare in general and also paediatrics. But starting first with healthcare, what makes it so stressful?
I think the demand of the job, the inflexible and long working hours, very long period of training, huge amount of responsibility. They're just some of the things that make it a huge burden to carry. So I think paediatrics in general is a tougher specialty. You're working with unwell children. That's, for everyone, that is difficult to cope with. You're working with desperate parents. Actually, I think in paediatrics you have highest level of aggression experienced, highest level of complaints made because you've got parents with threat systems activated and who are struggling. So I think that makes it particularly difficult. And then, of course, if the higher proportion of paediatricians are women, they will be more likely to be holding a lot of what goes on at home, which there's more juggling that goes on.
Just a month ago, we had a really sad case where we lost a mother's life and her babies, very, very sick, essentially. And that case really got to me because you can understand why, but it's a very difficult case to deal with, and it affected the entire team, not just me. Just about being kind to yourself, stopping. We'd organised a whole load of debrief sessions, multiple debrief sessions actually, to try and bring the whole team together to reflect on this awful case. In particular, one of our trainees was very, very badly affected, and it was about showing that trainee that I'm affected too. I'm still human. I'm not suddenly okay with all of this just because I'm a consultant. It was recognising that and showing others that it's okay not to be okay sometimes.
When you first start as a consultant, you kind of get used to being the clinical role, and that was quite fun. And then I took on some extra things, some management things and some teaching things, and then took on some more of those, and that was quite fun. And I was kind of coping, but then I took on some more things as well. And you hardly realise what's going on, but suddenly you find that you're really very, very stretched indeed. Well, for me, it was a bit of a crash, actually quite literally a crash. And I don't think I'd really realised what was going on, but I was using exercise as a way of trying to cope with the stresses that I was getting. I think I was sleeping less. I was doing things more quickly. I was certainly much shorter with people in my interactions with them, including my wife. I started writing stuff down and actually put a blog together all about my kind of recovery and my thoughts all around that, which was extremely helpful to me.
One evening I was on call, and I was called to a child in resuscitation who was what we call suspended, and this child wasn't breathing and there was no output. And the child was the same age as my own son at that time. And this child had choked on a small sweet, which were probably a few millimetres in size. And I had partly the anxiety of, oh my goodness, what if this were my child? And the distress of the family around us. And it happened that the team who were there, we'd all been on a resuscitation course the previous weekend. And luckily, I just said, well, I'm just going to give it one more go. And I was successful, and we managed to dislodge this thing and save the child's life. And that was great. But afterwards, I thought about it, and the fear and the worry about your anxiety about your own children, and when things don't go as you would like, set in for a while.
I think what comes to mind when thinking about vulnerable moments in my career so far was in my ST1. Unfortunately, my mom suddenly passed away, and I was unable to go back home for any of that.
Well, I did have some help through occupational health, but it wasn't kind of psychological support as such, it was space. And actually that's really what I needed. I had around me the friends I needed and the contacts and the people that knew me well enough and were compassionate towards me. And they actually enabled me to talk things through and give me space to find a way through for myself.
I think subsequent to that, I was really grateful to have good supervisors and a good college tutor who said, clear Chris's schedule, this is obviously going to be a difficult time. He won't be able to come back to work for some time. So thankfully, I felt that I was encouraged and supported by them.
I think it's really important to remember that when somebody comes to work, they're not just there because they're a doctor. They're bringing with them something that may have happened at home before they walked into that shift. I try and remember just to be kind to everybody, whether that's and that could be anybody, trainee, consultant colleague, nursing colleague. When there's been a difficult case, and that might be different for different people, just checking in, checking they're okay to work the next day, giving them that space just to talk about things, reflect, and know that they're not alone, and know they can knock on my door or call me or phone me or message me anytime they need to.
I've been at work and I've seen somebody that I know and I've worked with be slightly different. And they may seem to me like they're struggling, but they haven't told me. And how would I bring that up and without imposing myself on them or making them feel awkward?
Yeah, it's hard to, and I think it's almost as if there's a step before that, which is about building that culture where it's okay to talk about well-being and vulnerability. That actually, you know, there can be different setups so we can have these conversations. We can have formal conversations where we might check in with people with a concrete agreement that we're going to see how you're doing and how you're faring with stuff in and out of work. There can be informal chats where it's a more light touch, checking in with how someone is. And actually the way we might start those conversations, we can be sort of bring in that common humanity that we understand, you know, to actually say to someone, oh, I'm feeling it quite hard going at the minute, you know, how are you finding it? Or you've just mentioned there about saying that you've noticed a change in someone, saying actually you haven't seemed quite your same energetic self, you know, is there something going on? So even allowing that space. And it's about also not just what we say, but how we say it. You know, actually we need to listen a bit longer than normal. We need to, you know, bring empathy, but not be overwhelmed ourselves by what someone brings. So I think it's about ensuring that we're checking in with people irrespective of how they're presenting on the outside.
I want to think about the future to see what I can do to protect myself from burnout, and what are the things that I might notice that I can then act on.
I think we're looking at different areas where we might notice change. We might notice change in how we feel. So actually noticing feeling more readily overwhelmed, perhaps becoming forgetful, feeling stressed, feeling anxious before days at work, more so than usual. It might be about something that we're noticing in our thinking style, perhaps being more likely to be self-critical, I can't do this, other people are doing it better than me, what's wrong with me, all those sort of thinking styles where it's very all or nothing, black and white thinking or catastrophizing. And then behaviourally, we notice changes in ourselves, actually, you know, more run down, eating more, eating less, avoiding social events, avoiding public speaking. And maybe there's things that we would normally do and slowly but surely they're fading away, and actually we need to pick up on some of those in ourselves.
Lucy, can you describe to me what compassionate leadership is?
Yes, let's try and do that in a nutshell. We want our teams to feel psychologically safe, and by that we mean that this is a place where you can be vulnerable, you can make mistakes, but you can hold your hand up to those. So there's something about feeling safe in that environment that's very important. And there are sort of 4 key areas, I suppose, in compassionate leadership. There's something around attending, so really listening to those that you're working with. There's understanding, so taking the time to make sense of where someone's coming from, their experience. There's empathy. We've talked about that already, but being able to, you know, understand someone's feeling and mirror it, but without being overwhelmed ourselves. And then the important bit with compassion is about taking action. So how do we help someone as an individual or as a team to make choices and take actions that are thoughtful and progressive and will make a difference?
I think we create a team by actually thinking together about what the challenges really are. So in paediatrics and medicine in general is a very demanding area. You know, you're dealing with a lot of trauma in that. And to actually effectively do this long term in a sustainable way, which is what we're really after, you know, we might be working for 20, 30 years in a single team, you have to allow space for that. And you have to allow space for communication and space to actually share your problems with other people. So you need a team that actually becomes adept at doing that, because that's what's going to be needed.
I think to make a team that has space, we need to allow ourselves a bit of time And that sounds really obvious, but most of us have got very busy job plans and pretty much on the go from when people arrive to when they leave. And I'm struck by some other industries in which they have time just to chat or to mull over things. And actually in the space of that, they can be a bit more vulnerable with their colleagues. They can talk a bit about themselves, and we can find out what makes each other tick.